What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Potomac. This is season 10, episode 20, part 3, and the final part of the reunion. Three things, okay? One, this could have been an email. Part 2 and 3 definitely could have been emails. A quick little summary video real quick. Number 2, Karen's behavior actually disappointed me and turned me off. I was not happy with Miss Grindom. And number 3, not Giselle getting in trouble. Not the network actually trying to reprimand Miss Mamas. I said, ooh, somebody's in danger, girl. Because not you not having a package. And us not noticing until Wendy pointed it out, girl. How did Monique and Jazzy get a packet? The friends of have packages, and you are the matriarch, one of the faces of this franchise. You better tighten up. You in danger, Giselle. You better tighten up. But let's get into this review. Sometimes before we get into the review, we get a little spicy, just a little bit. And I just have a few things I want to talk to you about, but honestly, just two things. First up, I did do a standalone spicy corner. I'll put the thumbnail on the screen. I talked about Monique clearing Stacey's name after showcasing those receipts on the reunion. Ashely basically explaining at a live event hosted by the Reality Rundown, a blog that I've referenced on this channel from time to time. They're out, expanding and doing live events. She also was there hosting an event. They were honoring her for, 10 years of being on the show. And she exposed what was said on the audio, or more specifically, who in reference was in the audio or who was speaking in the audio. Also, Angel going back and forth with people on threads as it pertains to her relationship, and people referencing Monique as a source as to why they can speak that way. All right. So if you're interested in anything I just said, please check the link in the description box below. Now, one thing I do want to get into that is new is Andy. So a lot of people have had pretty negative things to say about Andy and his hosting skills, especially when it comes to him doing the reunions for Salt Lake City, Potomac, as well as the Traders. I've seen the worst critiques from the way that the Traders reunion went down. But honestly, I don't know if I blame Andy too much, because it feels like the network wants Traders to be light and fluffy. They don't want it to get serious or let them dig into some serious things. But that's just my take on it, okay? But shouts out to Sutton's Roller, because they posted a screenshot of Andy quote tweeting somebody on threads who was defending him. So it says this: Andy's feeling the heat, hashtag RHOP, hashtag RHOSOC, hashtag the US Traders. So a person by the name of IR the third says, the reunion tapes for hours. When Andy says let's move on, it's usually because the women quite literally don't get to the bottom of this on whatever they're talking about, and the convo is condensed into the edit. And so Andy quote tweeted that by saying this in capital letters with multiple exclamation points, and then fingers pointing down like, yes, y'all. I know a lot of people feel like Andy is tired of hosting. I don't think that's the case. I think we are expecting reunions like how they used to be when reality TV, in my mind, was like in its heyday. Also, if you realize, Andy is in his 50s. Real Housewives has been on for 20 years. That means when he first started, he was in his 30s. That's two different types of energy. Okay, so I just feel like everyone expecting Andy to have the same energy, it is not fair to him. But I can also tell when Andy's enjoying himself, and I think to a degree Andy did enjoy this reunion. But if you look at the reunion, there wasn't much there. Like, the three people who had the most to say and was referenced was Angel, Wendy, and Stacey. We ran packages for a Kiarna. We weren't really invested in that. Jazzy's package, not really invested in that. Tia, not really invested. Monique, not really invested. Ashely, not really invested. Giselle didn't even get a package. So he's working with what he got. And I don't even think the reunion was that bad. But also, I'm at the point where I'm like, we don't need to keep having 3-part reunions. 2-part reunions are fine. Hell, a one part reunion is fine as if you can get to everything all at once and we could keep it pushing. I think the network is so tied into giving three parts because they want to glean so much from advertisement because they're greedy and capitalism sucks. But I think that's what's happening. I also feel like everyone wants reunions to be as explosive as they used to be back in the day. And it's like, I feel like most of those people, if we think about it, didn't understand the gravity of what getting on TV and showing yo, you know what, would do for you. It's worked out for some, but not for all. So I think most people who come to the reunions really like, trying to act up, but not really act up. They still want to have a job after this and they still want to get brand deals. So I think we have to be reasonable with our demands. But I do think if Andy isn't going to switch up how he hosts these reunions, he does need to start training a successor. You're in your 50s. I know you don't want to do this until you in your 60s. So you might as well get somebody that we all somewhat like and live out your golden days and just watch what happens live. Ask your questions on what you see. Andy is way better with asking questions on Watch What Happens Live than he is hosting. And I feel like let go of hosting the reunions and just do Watch What Happens Live. People will still tune in. All right, y'all. So clearly it is a new day, but we are here. So let's continue on. So the episode opens up. And honestly, before I get into the review, like I said in the intro, this third part really wasn't needed. It felt like part 2, we rushed to get to part 3. And I feel like that's on production. I think production thought the Karen of it all would be what people wanted to see. Karen's on the stage interacting with the ladies. But honestly, it didn't have the effect, at least for me, and I feel like for a lot of people, it was just kind of meh. It felt like, great analogy. You know when you go out to eat and you're eating something really good and you can't finish it all, so you bring back leftovers. It's the next day you warm it up and it's good, but not great. It's like, it's all right, but it doesn't taste like it did when it was fresh. And that's what this felt. It felt stale. Like, okay, like I feel like we had the makings. Like there's certain parts of this that's good, but it's still stale. All right. But let's get into it. So the episode opens up where it left off, where Monique is presenting her phone with this audio on it that we don't hear because like 98% of it is redacted. It sounds like I am watching the BET Hip Hop Awards and NBA YoungBoy is on stage rapping. And if you've heard his music, every other word is a cuss word. Like we couldn't make out anything other than the last two parts of the video where Monique basically tells the person she's on the phone with, thank you for confirming that for me. So she plays this audio, which is supposed to implicate Stacey, meaning that to show that Stacey was still in contact with Chris Samuels or at least leaking information to him. And everybody is pretty surprised. Giselle's mouth is wide open. Like she is shocked at what she's hearing. And then you have Kiarna looking smug like, yeah, get her, you know? And Andy's looking at Stacey like, girl. And I'm irritated because why present us audio that us as the audience can't hear? Clearly, Monique thought this was going to be another binder moment, but that's not it because we didn't get to hear what was said. So the shock value of it is taken away from us because we don't get to hear what these people are reacting to. So how are we going to be able to give our honest opinion about what is presented if we can't hear it? And Monique presented that information knowing that it was going to be redacted because she said before playing the video, I know like you won't be able to air this, but I just want to play it anyway. So you knew we wouldn't be able to hear it. So why would you think that we would just automatically jump on the bandwagon of like, yes, your receipts were damning to Stacey if we didn't get to hear it for ourselves? That's stupid. That's dumb to me. So pretty much Andy looks at Stacey and he's like, Stacey, are you in communication with Chris Samuels? And if you are, did you tell him that Monique was filming with their children? Stacey's like, no, I did not do that. Then she brings up this story about only going into Monique's room to use the bathroom. And I'm guessing they filmed this while they were in Colorado. I'm guessing. But then I kind of got confused because I remember him saying that Stacey was the only one with water, but maybe it switched and then Monique's room was the only one with water. I don't know. I was confused. So then Stacey says, literally, I just went through divorce, so why would I involve myself with what you have going on? I know how difficult divorce is. So then Monique's like, which that's my question. Like, that's why I don't understand why you would. And Stacey says, why would I want to harm you, Monique? Like, what benefit is that to me? She goes on to say, like, the only person I really talk to is my husband, whom I live with, and I'm worried about my family, and that's it. So then Andy interjects into the conversation and he says, well, why would so-and-so bring this up? Like, on the flip side, why would they make that up? And they bleep out the person's name. So then Kiarna is like eager as hell to jump into the conversation. And I'm like, Kiarna, shut up. Like, hush. And Stacey's like, no, let me finish speaking. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, because this is not directed towards you. It's directed towards her. Kiarna's such a disappointment. So then Stacey says, I have not spoken to Chris about you or your children and or filming. So then Andy says, so you're saying that you have not spoken to Chris while production has been going on? And Stacey's like, no, I wasn't in communication with him. So then Monique says, well, you were, because you showed me text messages of y'all having a conversation, and that was before I even got into the group. When they flash back to what Monique is talking about, she's talking about that sit down that had her, Wendy, Stacey, Kiarna, and Ashely. But this wasn't a gotcha moment that Monique thinks it is, because in that conversation, Stacey proved that she stopped talking to Chris before Monique even got into the group, because at first she says that Chris had an attitude because it was a picture of Stacey and her daughter. They were on the cover of a magazine. Chris sent Stacey a text message saying, you guys look great. Stacey never responded to him because at that time Stacey decided she no longer wanted to be in contact with Chris. Weeks later, Chris ends up texting Stacey, hey, hit me up. I heard my name was coming up during filming, meaning that somebody had already told Chris that his name was being brought up during filming, and he was only contacting Stacey because he wanted information from her. That to me should have been Monique's way of being like, okay, it's not you. But for some reason, she wants it to be Stacey. And the only reason why Monique wants it to be Stacey is because she's trying to prove her loyalty to Giselle and Ashely. Because the only people that has really been really beefing with Stacey is Giselle, Ashely, Kiarna, Tia, and Jazzy. Who the hell is Tia, Kiarna, and Jazzy to Monique? When Monique was on this show during season 2, it already has a fan base. She's doing this to show her allegiance and loyalty to Giselle and Ashely because she wants to be clicked up with them. Because this does not make sense, all right? Because for her to involve her children in this is such a stupid move to me, because if Chris is already sending you a cease and desist, and if he is as vindictive as Monique has said he is, why would you involve them into this petty drama? Because I talked about this in the spicy corner. I have a video of Ashely at the Reality Rundown live event basically explaining the reason why the audio was bleeped out is because, one, Chris has not signed off for his kids to be on the show, but two, it was because it was Monique's daughter in the audio saying, who is Stacey? Or somebody saying that your daughter asked me who was Stacey, but basically I'm pretty sure the little girl was in the audio. So I'm just like, why was it that deep for you to involve your children? Monique was trying to have another binder moment, and this fell flat. And she also was trying to click up and show her allegiance to Giselle and Ashely, because this was dumb. This was dumb. And then all for you to come out days after the reunion, which I talked about also in the spicy corner, to clear Stacey's name, saying that now that time has passed, you realize that it wasn't Stacey. Girl, you're stupid. You're stupid, okay? Because as the conversation continues on, Kiarna jumps into it saying, when we met you, Monique, you didn't know us, but you poured your heart out to us, and that meant something to me. I got on the phone with Cookie right after that, and she was so upset about the situation, saying he's going to send her a cease and desist. I felt like Kiarna was telling on herself, because I honestly believe Ashely, Kiarna, and Cookie and Monique are now in cahoots. Because I'm looking at Monique. You have someone who's admitting to you that they are in communication with Cookie, someone you said that you don't trust and you don't like and you don't feel comfortable around. And you're still going to run with the narrative that Stacey was the one leaking information when you have Kiarna, who has a direct line of communication with Cookie, just like Ashely. Ashely, the same one who knows that you're in this contentious custody battle, but got on a platform that is going to hit a bunch of other platforms to tell us that you involved your children into this situation after the network saved you by bleeping everything out. Yeah, you're stupid, and now I feel like you in cahoots. You in cahoots, Monique. Because Kiarna then goes on to say to Stacey, and you were wrong for doing this. And Stacey's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do it. She was like, it's simply not true. I wouldn't do that. So then Andy ends up saying, Wendy, I'm looking at you and I can read body language and it feels like you're looking at Stacey, looking for her to confess. And Wendy ends up saying, I don't think I'm waiting for Stacey to confess, but the tides are turning and I'm seeing it in real time. She says, to hear so-and-so, and they bleep out the daughter's name, say that, it takes this to a different level. So then Andy ends up asking Stacey, so what is your response to this? Stacey ends up saying, I don't have anything to say. Like, I wouldn't do nothing like that. So then Wendy ends up asking Monique, what do you think about this? Giselle tries to answer for Monique by saying she's going to believe, and she says the little girl's name. And Wendy's like, no, Giselle, I want to hear what she has to say. And Monique says, yeah, I'm like, my daughter doesn't have, well, she says the girl's name, but basically my daughter doesn't have any reason to lie. She's never met Stacey. So when she brought up Stacey's name, I was like, how do you know her? But I'm also like, okay, she asks, who is Stacey? Did you ask her, well, why are you asking me who is Stacey? Because that would have been my response if I was Stacey. Okay, she says, who is Stacey? Well, did you ask her, like, why are you asking me who is Stacey? Because then she could have told you, well, I heard so-and-so talking about Stacey. I heard dad talk about, I heard you and your, auntie this and auntie that talk about her. Like, you just can't say because she asked you who is Stacey that is confirmation that Stacey has been talking to Chris or spreading information to Chris. Like, what are we talking about? So Stacey says, I wouldn't do that. Like, I wouldn't do that to you. I don't have anything to gain from it. So then Monique is like, well, why are daggers coming out at you to this magnitude? And Stacey says, well, I would not involve myself with your ex-husband and I would beg for you to be smarter. Because I'm like, yeah, because she's stupid. She's dumb. And I'm just like, this is stupid. This, like, she really thought she was going to have another Binder moment. And this fell incredibly flat, just like her return to this show. Like, girl, what? In theory, Monique should be a great housewife. When she first stepped onto the scene, she's beautiful because you can't take that mug away from her. The face card does not decline with her. She's beautiful. She had the husband. She had the kids. She has the money. But in practice, Monique is a subpar housewife. The only reason people go up for her is because she's pretty. If Monique was average looking, y'all would be wanting her to get kicked off the show. But y'all like looking at pretty things. I have known this about Monique since season 4. I've been watching this show since season 1. I liked Monique, but I never thought Monique was a great housewife. Never. Never. Okay? She is mediocre. And y'all love her down. Y'all love her down. So then Monique was like, well, I'm trying to get to the bottom of who is leaking this information. So Stacey's like, well, why don't we just call Chris? Let's just call Chris. Monique says, well, he will never be accountable for anything. Then why bring up this information if you don't have like concrete receipts? I told y'all when it comes to receipts, 3 things. They need to be clear to the audience and to the people. It needs to be clear to read. We need to be able to, everybody needs to be able to understand it on stage and through the TV screen. It needs to be 2, quick and to the point. Okay? And 3, it needs to be able to where you cannot refute it. I can refute this, Monique. It's not a good receipt. So then Jazzy throws out there that why would we call Chris because she had sex with Chris and she's probably still having sex with him. I said, Jazzy, shut up with your ugly slick back hair. You don't need to come back just like Kiarna don't need to come back. Because that hair actually really irritated me. Because why would you throw out there that she's having sex with this man if you don't have proof? You do the same thing where you throw information out there hoping that it will stick. And when it doesn't, you look dumb. Because, girl, you were just throwing a fit about Tia teasing you about Mr. Sunshine liking you, knowing good and well that Stacey is back with Timu. So why would you throw that out there? So then Tia jumps into the conversation saying, well, we have to get to the bottom of this. I hear you, Stacey, constantly talking about your family, but what about what her family's been through? And I'm like, girl, Tia, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. All of y'all shut up. I'm so annoyed. So we get away from that conversation about Stacey and Monique and Chris and all of that stuff. And now we're talking about the different events that they had throughout the season. So they talk about the Nevis trip. Andy reads a viewer's question, and this person is like, Giselle, do you regret not embroidering Stacey's stuff, like intentionally leaving her out? And Giselle says, no, I don't. She said, but I do apologize. I would have gotten Stacey the right size. I didn't know that the size of her robe was a large. I would have gotten her right size, but I still wouldn't have put her name on any of like the items because I was being shady. The way Andy made a face like you can kind of tell like production and them are getting annoyed with Giselle. And I'm actually surprised because I never thought I'd see the day. Never thought I would see the day, okay? So the conversation continues on with Giselle just saying like, yeah, like didn't put her name on it. I did it to be shady. And so Stacey's like, look, shade accepted. It's okay. The shade was accepted. Then they start talking about Angel constantly wanting the ladies to sit down and meditate. And Angel says, look, I realize now that is not what this group is into. So going forward, I won't be doing none of that. All right. You hear Monique say, look, if I would have gotten in this group sooner, I would have loved that type of stuff. Then Andy brings up that it seems like the ladies, all of y'all got along when y'all were actually singing together. They flash back to when they were at the polo event for Sotheby's singing Lift Every Voice. So Giselle keeps making this blowfish face throughout the entire reunion. Like, and at first, I thought she was trying to swallow a laugh, but sometimes it just felt like she was just doing it just to do it. It was weird. I didn't get it. I was like, is your mouth hurting? Are you trying to keep yourself awake? Are you tired? I was confused. So Andy ends up saying, who would be the Beyonce in the group? Ashely raises her hand. Angel raises her hand. Angel would be the Beyonce because Angel can actually sing. Like Angel sang on the after show, but also she revealed on the after show that she's like classically trained. So Ashely ill. You see Stacey push Ashley's hand down, and then Angel said, girl, Roberta Flack is rolling in her grave. I said, yes, she is. She is. Very much so. You sound a horrible mess, ma'am. Horrible, girl. You were doing karaoke. Horrible. So then they start asking Tia, did she sell a house? This was confusing because her and Jazzy start arguing back and forth, and I did not understand how it started off. I think Andy ended up asking Tia, did she sell any houses while she was on the show? And she said, yes, she sold more than one house. And then I think Jazzy said something slick, like, oh, that was great or great for you. And then Tia says, it's way better than your $150,000 townhouse. She spent $150,000 on a townhouse. Or was she saying that, I get the shade, basically saying that, girl, you said that Darius paid $150,000 in cash for that house, but why would anybody pay $150,000 for a townhouse in the DMV area, girl? It's not like you got beachfront property. Like, what are we doing? So you then hear Jazzy say, oh, good, now you can take care of your hubby. Because I guess she's saying that her husband don't got no money. I don't know. It was weird. The argument was weird. It was weird. So then they start talking about Colorado and Angel dropping the ball. And they said, Angel, like Andy's like, Angel, you got a lot of blowback for the way that you handled the Colorado trip. And Angel says, in hindsight, I would have definitely done things differently. And I see why having the women split in two houses wasn't the best idea. So they also bring up how a lot of people thought it was funny that she put Giselle and Ashely in the smallest room or made them share a room. And Angel said, yeah, I did that based off of the way that they were treating me. And Giselle says, boo, tomato, tomato, but y'all deserve that because y'all were treating her very poorly. So she had a right to put you in a room, a small room at that. So then they talk about the water issues and there not being any water. So then Andy ends up asking the stage, does anybody think that Giselle overstepped when it came to Angel? And Kiarna says, yes, I do. And then you hear Giselle say, of course you do, Kiarna, because you weren't there. You didn't have to live in that house with us. Like, you had a house with running water. And Kiarna's, well, I've been on trips that haven't been that great, that's had mishaps, Giselle. So she refers to the DR trip. I guess the room that she was in when they were in the DR had mold. So she was having a hard time breathing. So in the middle of the night, she had to move to a different location. And she said she still couldn't breathe. But I'm like, girl, having mold where you can still move to a different location and not be in a room ridden with mold is different from being in a house where you can't move anywhere else and you can't wash your body or poop or flush the toilet. So I'm with Giselle on that. It's worse not to have water. Okay? So Kiarna was trying her best, but Giselle was like basically told her to shut up. Because she says, I think not having water trumps what you're saying. And they stopped the conversation. So then Angel ends up saying, look, like, I took responsibility for everything. I'm sorry that things didn't go so well. And then Giselle says, you're saying that now, but during the trip, you didn't say that. You didn't say that. And Angel says the only reason how she knew things weren't good was because she reached out to Jazzy. I think Angel just needs to own the fact that you did not do a good job hosting. Whether production had their hand in this or not, you had the ability to contact, like, you were supposed to do that. If they were an hour away from you, you were supposed to contact them every morning and ask everybody if they were okay. And the fact that you reached out to Jazzy and not to them, and we know you guys have a group chat with all of y'all in it, then that's a you problem, girl. You have to take that L. Because Giselle ends up saying, you should have been checking on us. And she should have. She should have. So then Andy ends up asking her, well, how did y'all get lost? Like, how did that happen? How did you get lost? Like, that doesn't make sense. And then they show a receipt of production dropping Angel a pin. And Angel was like, they dropped me a pin and it says this: good morning, lady. The teams are mobilizing for the lake, but are concerned about the coordinates we receive. Can you check where we are headed? So I don't know what happened, because I did see some people say, well, what if production gave her a faulty pin? But I don't think so, when everybody that works with her was already there. So I don't know what happened. I really don't. And then Andy brings up how they've never ended a season at a gas station. And so then Giselle was like, well, you were going around, Angel, saying you were Miss Denver. And Angel was like, I never said I was Miss Denver. And she was like, look, I've already taken responsibility for how wrong the trip went. Like, I don't know what else y'all want me to do. I wish I could have done things differently, but I don't know what y'all want me to do. Okay. And then they end this segment by kicking Jazzy off the stage. Then we see Karen pull up, and I will say she looked good in that fur. She looked good in her. She looked like some mob boss's wife showing up to his court hearing. I was like, I kind of live. Now time for Karen to make her way to the stage. We see as she's walking towards the stage with her cousin that the ladies are talking about Karen's one-on-one sit down with Andy. Kiana is gushing about it, talking about how good it was. Giselle says, you were hard on her, Andy, and I think that was great. She also talks about how she was always worried about Karen being on her own by herself in the wild and in the streets. And she also states how she thinks what happened needed to happen for Karen to have basically a wake-up call. Karen is on stage, but before she gets on stage, Andy ends up saying that she feels like Karen owned a lot of stuff. I said, you thought she owned a lot up in that one-on-one? Okay, Andrew. But Karen gets on stage. Everyone gushes about how beautiful she looks and how great she looks. As she sits down, Andy ends up saying, how does it feel to have the Grand Dame back? And then he like stops himself and he says, you know what? You mentioned to me that you wanted to shed the moniker of Grand Dame. How is that going? And Karen said, let's be clear. I am grateful for that title, but I never needed. They flash back to season 2 when them wigs were atrocious that Karen had on her head. And she's telling the ladies that she's moving from Potomac to Greater Falls. And you have Ashely saying, girl, then I guess you won't be the Grand Dame of Potomac anymore. And her telling them that like the people bestowed the Grand Dame title onto her and she greatly accepted it. So until she relinquishes it, it's not anybody's to have. And I said, okay, girl, showing that Karen's not just going to give this up. So Karen says she's tried to shed the moniker, but it's not working. So she'll continue to use it basically. But I was like, you've only been out of jail for 4 months. So have you really tried? Because I'm not feeling like you've really tried. Okay. So Andy ends up asking the ladies who is happy to see Karen. And Giselle said that she is super excited. She was like, I just told her I don't like doing reunions without her. And then Karen also tells Andy, I was ready to sit on your lap if somebody was sitting in my seat. So Karen already has this air about herself that she knows that she was going to be sitting first chair and that next season is hers for the taking, because to automatically assume that if somebody was sitting in your chair that you was going to sit on Andy's lap or make your way to the front is interesting to me, because they could have just put Karen at the end of the couch the same way they put Jazzy and Monique at the end of the couch, because she wasn't on this season. But they didn't do that. So they are propping Karen back up to take her spot back. So as the conversation continues on, Andy ends up asking Wendy, what do you think about all of this? And Wendy says, I haven't seen Karen in a while, but I'm happy to see her on the other side of this. And Karen says, thank you. Okay. So then Andy says, who on the stage have you not met? We find out that it seems as though Karen has met Angel and Tia. And when I tell you, I have never seen Angel smile this hard, and Kiarna. When I tell you Angel and Kiarna were showing all 32 teeth in their mouths, like I said, my God, it's giving fanned out. It's giving groupie behavior. Calm down. Wait until Karen tries to stab you in the back. Then you ain't going to be smiling so hard. Because Karen tries the people around her. She does. She's just been able to get away with it because she's a fan favorite. That's it. That's all. So they talk about Karen seeing the show and watching the show and saying that she said when she would see things getting off rails, sometimes she would want to call the phone and call the girls and tell her to just tell Giselle to F off and keep it pushing and let things go. And Giselle would have just told them, okay, next. And Giselle says, you're right, because she doesn't care. Giselle doesn't care. So then Andy brings up Monique, and you hear Karen say, oh, you look so beautiful, Monique. And Monique says, I am genuinely happy for you, Karen. So then Andy asks Karen, who has been the most supportive to you? And she says that it has been Giselle. Giselle was like leaving notes in her mailbox, and she says she's got them. So then they bring up Giselle saying that she wanted Karen to be in the elderly wing of jail. And so they flash back where Giselle's like, I want Karen in like the elderly section, like the I think Ashely was like the ARRP section. And Karen says, girl, I wanted to tell Giselle to F off. I didn't care. So then they start talking about Stacey and Karen's relationship. Karen looks past Stacey, and I couldn't tell if she was under the influence of something because her mouth was moving kind of funny. So maybe she got lip filler and it was looking weird and like it hadn't what's it called, settle, or I don't know if she really didn't know that Stacey was sitting next to her because she looked around and looked past her, and Stacey was like, were you looking for me? Like, were you looking for me? I was so, like, when I tell you I was so confused by Karen's behavior, I didn't want to assume that she was under the influence of something, but I said, why would you look past this lady when you're sitting right beside her? I was so confused. So, because I was like, is she being shady or does she not really see Stacey sitting beside her? I didn't know. Okay. So then they start talking about the fallout between Stacey and Karen and how they didn't end off on a good note. And so Karen ends up saying, well, did you lie this season to Stacey? And she's like, that's no shade. That's a question to you. And Stacey said, what did I lie about? I haven't lied about anything this season or last season. And so Karen said, well, no, last season, it was your boyfriend. You said he was your boyfriend, but they said he wasn't your boyfriend. But then I'm hearing that you might be dating Chris Samuels and you might not. And then Stacey says, I'm not. None of that is true. Like, none of that's true, And so Andy says, where do you guys stand? And Stacey's like, well, girl, I don't know. Clearly, that's where we stand based off of what she just did with me, questioning me in that way. And so then Karen says, basically, don't use what I just said, like me questioning you as a definitive answer as to where we stand in this relationship, but I can't take the lies. I just can't do the lies. And she was like, please don't lie to me because I'm the only one that lives in Potomac. And Stacey was like, what? I don't know what was going on with Karen with this interaction. When I tell you Karen could not say anything to me about lying when all last season you lied to the public by screaming that you would be vindicated only for us to get body cam footage of you saying that you were Thomas Jefferson's concubine. I would have told that lady, I need you to have at least a year of sobriety underneath your belt before you come questioning me. I need you to blow into a breathalyzer before you question my truth. Like, what are you talking about, Karen? You have no room to question anybody about lying when you ran your car into a tree and it blew up. It caught fire, Karen, and you blatantly lied about it for a year. A year. Who gives a damn if Stacey was lying about TJ being her boyfriend for like 6 months? You lied to us about not drinking and driving only for us to get body cam footage of your wig in the middle of your forehead. Girl, never could you question me. You could never question me. I was so irritated. So, and what does you having to live in Potomac have anything to do about somebody lying? Girl, what? So then Andy ends up asking her, well, I want to know, how was your journey with sobriety? Karen says it's absolutely wonderful. She's lying. She's lying. She says, I'm in recovery in all levels of my life and I'm at peace. And so Andy says, the last time we sat down, you were having trouble accepting or owning the fact that you would not call yourself an alcoholic. Karen made the same face she made when Andy asked her in the sit down, like, would you consider yourself an alcoholic? The whole, like, she did the same. I said, oh, she's about to lie. She is about to lie. And she did. Because they flash back to the sit down, and when Andy ends up asking her, do you consider yourself an alcoholic? And Karen says, no, I consider myself a person in lifelong recovery. So Karen says she still does not consider herself an alcoholic. Ashely's face was my face. Girl, what? What? Ashely was like, that don't make sense, Karen. She says, that's a personal choice for me not to call myself an alcoholic. So then Andy says, well, isn't part of being an addict and overcoming it owning your addiction? And Karen says, well, I've owned everything about it and I have made a choice that is also very empowering. So, as a woman, I choose to say that I am in lifelong recovery and I'm completely sober at this point. I said, girl, what kind of response is that? What kind of response is that, so Karen? They start talking about Karen getting a standing ovation at BravoCon. Andy ends up bringing up how there were so many people who were excited to see her there. Now, if you have watched anybody who went to BravoCon, a lot of them said that they were clapping, or people were clapping for Karen for at least a good 4 or 5 minutes. So people were happy to see her. Andy brings up people who have critiqued the way in which people have responded to Karen's behavior. Like people asking, why are y'all applauding this lady in this situation when she could have seriously harmed someone and she put other people's lives at risk? What is your reaction to that, Karen? Karen basically says, first of all, I would hope that they would consider that facing your addiction is a brave act. And I know I served my time, but also that I have a right to thrive. I will say this. I do understand people's critique of how the fan base and even the Bravo celebrities have reacted to Karen. Everyone being excited that Karen's out of jail, her getting a standing ovation, people saying that it's iconic and all of this stuff. But what Karen did has serious consequences. She could have killed herself or she could have killed somebody else that was on the road, that was walking around. This situation could have been very dark and sad. And although it was sad, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So I understand people looking at the fan base and being like, y'all are weird. But I also understand Karen being like, look, I went to jail for 6 months. I told y'all that I drink from time to time and I'm popping pills and I'm a drug addict. I won't admit that I'm an alcoholic, but I'm a drug addict. What more do you want me to do other than I serve my time? And that's all we do to people who have addiction issues to begin with. Either you go to jail or you go to rehab. So she's gone to jail and she went to rehab. So what else is there for her to do? So then Giselle jumps into the conversation and she says, Karen did something bad, but she seems very accountable in this moment and she served her time. Monique jumps into the conversation saying, this whole time I've been quiet, but she says to know Karen is to know her walls. The only time she sees Karen's walls come down is when her parents passed away. And she says, to see her not care anymore, I'm just so proud of her. And then she starts crying. And I said, girl, why are you crying? Because Monique gave energy when she was in her interviews and in the after show that she actually was going to have an issue with Karen, saying that there's some things that her and Karen need to talk about, only for you to get on this stage and start crying. Girl, what the hell? So then you hear Karen say, thank you, but don't make me cry, Monique. So then Andy says, thank you for allowing me to be at your house that evening. It seems that you are going at your own pace. You're doing the work at your own pace, and we are proud of you. I said, yeah. My thing about it is I need Karen to admit that she's an alcoholic if she truly wants a recovery or sobriety. I don't believe she ever will, because I also feel like maybe not next season 11, but season 12, I can see Karen drinking. The same way Shannon, after she ran her car into them people's houses, would not own on Orange County that she was an alcoholic, but we saw her drinking throughout the season. The same way after Luann got arrested for public intoxication and trying to fight police officers, and she wouldn't own that she was an alcoholic. She just says, I drink from time to time. That was just a little too much. But then we saw them drinking on their seasons. I believe we're going to see Karen drinking. I do. I believe we're going to see her drinking here soon. And that's why she keeps saying that she is, battling the spirit of alcoholism or the disease of alcoholism, but she's never going to truly call herself an alcoholic, because once she slaps that moniker on her, she's going to have to answer to certain consequences. Because if people start seeing you drink on camera and you called yourself an alcoholic, you're not going to hear the end of that. And I don't think Karen is prepared or wants to face that reality. So Andy ends up bringing up how, a lot of people brought up that you were living in denial last reunion. They flash back to last reunion after Karen's message to the ladies, and you see Giselle saying that wasn't accountability. And Andy says, in our one-on-one sit down, you kept saying that you were in denial. And Andy says, how does that make you feel, Ashely? And Ashely says 100% better. So then they start talking about legal seafood and how Karen corroborated Ashely's story about legal seafood. They flash back to last reunion when Ashely brought up a story about some man on the train seeing her, saying that Karen used to get drunk at legal seafood down at Montgomery Mall. And Karen says, well, thank God she finally got something right with one of her stories about me. She wasn't lying. She was absolutely right about me. So then Andy brings up the Wendy portion where he's like, well, you said Wendy was lying about you. And they flash back to Wendy saying that she was at a restaurant. A guy came up to her saying that Karen comes here and she drinks every single day. And then they flash back to when Karen said in this one-on-one sit down that she doesn't have an idea of who Wendy is talking about and who would talk to Wendy. She lives in Timbuktu. And then Karen said, honestly, I don't know what Wendy was talking about, and I don't believe anyone talked to her about me. And so Wendy says, you can believe what you want. And so then Karen says, well, can you produce them, Wendy? I'm like, why does Wendy need to produce the people, but Ashely doesn't? Girl, when the whole streets knew you was a drunk. That's why I've always believed Charisse. I know people don't like Charisse, but when Charisse said that Karen was the town drunk, like that's how everybody knew her. I truly believe that somebody randomly came up to her and said, yeah, Karen used to get drunk all the time at the restaurant. Because when Wendy said, girl, we're on a public platform, people see us from every other state. I'm pretty sure people know about you, Karen. And so it is what it is. So then Andy brings up Wendy being upset about Karen's message at the reunion. So they flash back to when Karen was in the all white saying, thank you to Giselle, Kiarna, and even Andy when Andy was surprised. And then you have Wendy saying, that's not my friend. And so Wendy says, it is hard when someone is giving their flowers out to people, and you can give your flowers out to anyone you choose, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I wasn't stung by her not recognizing me. I felt some type of way. So then Karen says, well, I think we need to live in reality or deal in reality. That's what's most important. And she said, the reason why I didn't acknowledge you is because I felt betrayed by you because you took Stacey's side. So they flash back to the end of last season, season 9, when Stacey revealed that Karen told her that Wendy wasn't a girl's girl, that she wasn't someone you should trust in Potomac, and that she shouldn't be friends with her. And so then Wendy and Karen had a conversation where Karen was like, Wendy, do you really believe that? And Wendy said, Karen, I'm gonna just have to give you the side eye. So then Wendy said, girl, you betrayed me. You betrayed me first. Like, let's not misconstrue what happened first. You betrayed me first. So they show unaired footage that we saw in the trailer for last season, the mid-season trailer for Real Housewives of Potomac season 9, where they were picking out cutlery for Wendy's 40th birthday, and Karen and her had a sit down where Karen was like, when everyone was talking about your mother and calling her a witch back then, I had your back. So why are you not having unwavering loyalty to me? So then Wendy tells Karen, so when people are dragging you about your DUI and I've been advocating for you, like what is that to you? She said, and the fact that you would sit here and bring up the W word in reference to my mother, I wouldn't expect that from you. So Wendy is like, you called my mother a witch. And so Karen said, girl, for you to act like I was calling your mother a witch, and like to take pride, like I took pride in using that reference in reference to your mother, disgusts me. And honestly, this argument is stupid. What it boils down to is Wendy knows that Karen has never really seen it for her. Karen and Wendy did not have a friendship. They had an alliance. After season 5, when Karen put all her eggs in Monique's basket, she didn't have nobody to film with. So Wendy actually decided to film with Karen because, one, Karen was a fan favorite, and Wendy got tired of being ridiculed. People were calling her a man. People were being like transphobic towards her, xenophobic towards her, and colorist. And Wendy could not take the heat of the fans being so malicious and nasty to her, so she clicked up with Karen. But I've always remembered Karen saying that Wendy was not of Potomac. And I believe Wendy knew that. So when Stacey told Wendy, girl, she was talking bad about you, Wendy believed it. And honestly, the whole witch thing, I can see what Wendy is saying. Like, why even bring that word back up knowing how much it hurt my family? But it's this argument is stupid. It's stupid. So then Wendy was like, you brought up the witch thing, and I couldn't believe, she also says, I couldn't believe that you were talking poorly about me to Stacey. So for you to try to flip this on me is crazy. So you're saying like that I betrayed you, you betrayed me. So then Karen's like, no, girl, you betrayed me. And then she goes on to say, and no disrespect to your mother, I adore your mother. I practically love when she told you to shut the F up this season. And then that was like, it came out of left field. Like, I thought there was going to be a buildup to that conversation for Karen to use her that situation with Wendy, but it wasn't. Even Giselle was like, Karen. And I was like, Karen, why are you being this nasty? Like, it's quite unbecoming of you. Like, why are we being this nasty right now? Like, ew. Legit ill. I don't think Wendy really had a leg to stand on when it came to the whole witch of it all, but I do think she should have just stood at the point where she was like, girl, Stacey says you was talking poorly about me, and that bothered me, okay? But I don't believe that Karen was calling her mom a witch, but I wonder if Wendy felt like Karen, in a roundabout way, was trying to bring that conversation back up after Wendy has explicitly told Karen, I don't want nobody to call my mom a witch. Because the fact that she said for you to bring up the W word makes it seem like that was like a scarlet letter on her mother. So even trying to reference that moment was triggering and harmful to Wendy. But yeah, I don't get Karen's behavior. I don't. This argument, this back and forth is stupid. It just shows how weak the friendship was, and it was just an argument between Wendy and Karen continues on. You have everyone shocked by what Karen just said about her saying, you know, I admire your mom, and I particularly like the fact that she told you to shut the F up. Even Giselle, like I said, was like, Karen, and everybody else on stage was like, yo. Like, even Andy was looking at Karen like, girl. And I say this as someone who likes Karen more than I like Wendy. I like Wendy, but I feel like Wendy is a try hard and she's cringy at times, okay? But even I was like, that was nasty as hell from Karen. And I was looking at Karen like, girl, what crawled up your ass? Like, why are you on this stage behaving this way? It was very off-putting. And I feel as though Karen was, this whole entire part of the reunion was trying to get sound bites because, one, she knew that she was coming in at the end of the reunion, but two, she was still trying to perform because she wasn't on season 10 and she was locked up in jail. But this didn't land, and I think Karen realized it didn't land because as the segment continued on, she got a lot nicer towards Wendy because she looked bad. Because even Andy was like, girl, that was mean. Like, he was like, Karen. So Karen is yelling at Wendy, you need to be quiet. And Wendy is like, girl, I don't need to do anything. When I tell you me and Karen would have been on that stage arguing, I would have told Karen, I would have got nasty. Because who are you talking to, lady? Who are you talking to? Like, if we would have been, I would have been so nasty on this stage. Oh my God. Like, oh, it would have got nasty. They probably would have had to cut them cameras because I would have clicked out. Because, ma'am, Who are you talking to? Okay. So, like I said, Wendy ends up saying, I don't need to do anything. And Karen's like, you just need to be quiet, Wendy. And so Andy tells Karen, that was a very rough scene for her to like film and go through, like, girl. And Andy ends up saying, we gonna move on because it's clear both of you feel betrayed by each other and it's for different reasons and y'all are not gonna get to the bottom of this. And they both agree, like, no, we're not gonna get to the bottom of this. So then they run Wendy's package. They show her mom cussing her out and Monique being gagged. They then do the whole 3 months later and we see Wendy and Eddie's mugshot after they got arrested. You see Ashely, Kiarna, and Giselle at Ashely's house talking about the situation, and Giselle saying, girl, when the feds come for you, it's pretty much a wrap. Kiarna's in her confessional saying, honestly, I'm shocked. You have Stacey saying, it broke my heart to hear the news. And then we go back to Giselle and them, and she's like, girl, I mean, you have all these degrees. Why would you make such a poor decision and do a stupid crime? You have Tia in her confessional saying, Nigerians get stigmatized for being scammers and fraudsters, and this just isn't it. And then you have Angel being very smug in her confessional saying, really, I was just a red herring for her, and I hope justice is served. So they're looking at Angel like, girl, what did you mean by that statement? Andy ends up asking Angel, so what did you mean by that statement? And Angel says that she has her day in court. And then she goes on to say, I was a whipping boy of some sorts for her because she was going through something in her private life and she was using me as a red herring. Ashely ends up being like, girl, that's a reach. That's a reach. And honestly, Angel's energy towards Wendy is weird. I don't care that supposedly Angel's sister gave Wendy or helped Wendy get a job. I don't care that Wendy reached out to Angel and was like, I'm sorry for your loss when her mom died. I do not care. At the end of the day, the person that Angel should have the most smoke for, in my opinion, is Giselle. Giselle was messing and picking at that lady since Nevis. Like, and even co-signed when Wendy and Angel got into it at the Preakness event. That and Wendy really didn't mess with you after that, but you still have all this energy for her, and it's weird. And if Angel stays on this show, she better hope nothing bad happens between her and Bobby, or she doesn't do something stupid with her business, because I'm pretty sure the Wendy fans will be praying for your downfall, ma'am, because the energy that you have is really nasty and it's weird, because she hasn't done anything to you. To talk about you getting evicted is not that big of a deal. They basically called you a fat, ugly bitch. That's what Ashely and Giselle were saying about you, and you can't even buck up to them. But you got all this smoke for Wendy. You're weird, Angel. Like, you're weird. And I've been trying to like you, but you're weird. You remind me of this girl that I went to church, and I can't do it. I went to church with her. Her spirit was nasty. She tried to hide it all in this Zen and all this Jesus stuff and spirituality, but her spirit was nasty. And Angel kind of give that to me. Like, she may not be this way, but like, this moment really turned me off. And I was trying to give Angel a chance. Maybe she might be different if we get to see her next season. But as it stands right now, I don't really see it for her. Okay? So Andy ends up asking Wendy, how do you feel about what these women are saying about you, or what people are saying about you? And Wendy ends up saying, you know, for the past 4 months, she has been going through hell. Her family has been, and she's been at rock bottom. So honestly, people's opinions about her don't really matter. So then Andy brings up Giselle, Kiarna, and Ashely, and him saying, like, y'all didn't really seem like concerned friends in that clip. And Kiarna says she stands by what she said. She goes on to say that she feels like the dynamics of Wendy and her relationship were shifting and suffering because of what Wendy was going through. And Giselle says she feels the total opposite. She says her and Wendy have worked really hard to have a good relationship, and she actually felt bad. She says, you know, of course my heart goes out to your kids, but I'm trying to figure out that conversation that we had last year, did that happen before the burglary or after the burglary? And in this moment, I said, oh, Giselle really does like Wendy because she threw Wendy a bone. Because she gave Wendy an opportunity to throw Eddie under the bus, because they flash back to last season when Wendy admitted that she does not know how the bills get paid. Eddie takes care of that. She was like, she doesn't know who pays her mortgage. She doesn't know any of that. She doesn't even know her light company. So Giselle says, I don't want to say that I feel like I was duped by you, but I was just extremely disappointed in you. So then Wendy starts talking about the burglary. She expresses that the burglary happened in 2024 after her and her kids came and Eddie came back from a family vacation. She said that was right before filming. She goes on to say that when they came back home, her daughter, Cameron, ran upstairs and she said that Zoe made a mess. She was confused because she says that Zoe was at the doggy hotel. So Eddie went upstairs and saw the mess and came back downstairs and said, we need to call 911. And they reported a burglary. She said that was all in 2024. She said, fast forward to 2025, October the 9th, they heard a knock at the door. She sprinted through the breezeway because she heard the police was there and she yelled out, "Are my kids okay?" And then the police officer was like, "Do you remember me?" And they were like, "Yeah." And they basically said that they believe that a burglary did not happen. So she said all of this happened in 2000, the burglary 2024, me getting arrested in 2025. She said, we knew nothing after we posted the report. So Wendy's like, we didn't know. So to Kay's point, there was nothing going on between our dynamic. So then Andy ends up asking Karen, I know you have your issues with the law. Did you reach out to Wendy when this all went down? And Karen said, first of all, I wish your children absolutely the best. My heart goes out to them. She said, when I heard what was going on, I prayed that at your hearing that things would be dismissed so you could go back to your children. And then she goes on to say, I know I told you to shut the F up. But I think you took it out of context because you did what I didn't want you to do, which was answer that question. And she said, honestly, I wouldn't answer anything on stage today. Like, you're talking too much, Wendy. Like, I don't want you to go to jail. So Wendy is looking confused at Karen, like, what do you mean I'm talking too much? So then Karen's like, I'm begging you, Wendy, stop interviewing. But that's the thing, Wendy hasn't been interviewing. After that situation about them getting arrested in this whole case, I have yet to see Wendy do any public interviews or anything of that nature. The only time we saw Wendy after the arrest was when she was at BravoCon. Since then, they have been silent. They have not spoken on anything as it pertains to this case. And if she was doing press, it was to promote the show, and they didn't ask her anything about this situation. So Karen keeps saying, Wendy, I'm begging you not to say anything. And Wendy is trying to interject. And she was like, Karen, I understand. And she's like, no, let me finish. Because they watched the show and they could twist what you're saying. She goes on to say, if I was you, I would have said respectfully, Andy, I can't answer anything that you're saying. And Karen says, I want absolutely the best thing for you and Wendy. Like, I don't want you guys to go to jail. So then Wendy says, prior to coming on the show, me and Eddie spoke to our legal counsel and they knew about the line of questioning, and nothing I have said was not in public record. So I understand you saying that they could twist things around, but nothing you're saying, like nothing I said could be twisted because it's been documented. And she says, I receive what you're saying, Karen. I do, but I know when to be quiet. Basically, Wendy is like, I'm rehashing the same story. I'm not adding anything to it. I'm not taking anything away from it. It's already public record. It's already been documented. I've already been to court. But I get what you're saying and I appreciate what you're saying. So it is what it is. Andy brings up her family, Wendy's family, basically asking her, how did they react to the news? And Wendy says, a silver lining is that her mom and her sister has rallied behind her. And she was like, Eddie's family has rallied behind them, which I was surprised to hear because I definitely thought that they was going to jump ship on y'all. And I feel like if Eddie go to jail, they probably will. But she says they have come together in a way that she never thought was possible. Then Andy brings up how a lot of people have said that, girl, they feel like you did all of this to take care of your mom, to renovate the house, or to keep up appearances or an image on the show. Like that you are trying to keep up with the Joneses. So Andy says, how do you respond to that? Wendy basically says, I don't respond. People can have their narratives about this situation. That's on them. Then they start talking about the 67 credit cards and the multiple aliases. And Andy says, what do you think about that? And Wendy goes on to say, my legal counsel responded to that in court and they already corrected that narrative. There were no multiple aliases. We only use those aliases for packages, which I do believe, because people are weird. people are weird, especially if they know that you're a semi-celebrity or even an influencer, or even if you have like a small YouTube channel or a big one. People will probably use that against you. Like, so yeah, use aliases. Make sure you protect yourself. And then Wendy says, I have never used those aliases for financial means. And it was corrected by our lawyers. That's why Ashely 6'7" didn't read, because girl, she didn't read further. So then Andy ends up saying that there's also this narrative being pushed out there that you and Eddie are in an immense amount of, like, financial debt. And Wendy says, I respect the legal system. And if that's what they're saying, that's on them. Like, I respect the legal system. So Andy says, I would imagine that this has put a strain on your marriage. And Wendy says, yeah, it's one thing for one person to hit rock bottom. It's another thing for two people to hit rock bottom. And you guys are holding on to each other to hopefully rise to the top again together. I definitely think Wendy and Eddie are going to get a divorce, based off of what Shouts Out to the We Go podcast posted, because Eddie and Wendy actually had a day in court today, which is Wednesday, and she posted, let me pull it up for you guys so I can read it. She posted this: Wendy and Eddie will no longer be tried together. Eddie waived his right to a speedy trial, being tried within 180 days of being charged. There was extensive discovery, and he wants to take a deeper dive per prosecution. She goes on to say, Wendy wants a trial seemingly immediately. She did not waive her right to a speedy trial. The defense and prosecution were looking for dates in March. However, there were no available for a jury trial. This makes me wonder if this is a step up for Wendy to take the fall. She also says Wendy will not be able to have a trial as quickly as she wanted. The original trial date for her will be April the 5th, 2026. Due to the trial schedule, it will unfortunately have to be pushed out to May. She was willing to do a trial before the status conference. So to me, it kind of seems as if they're going to let Eddie take the fall for this, or get the brunt of most of what is happening, so that they will have somebody that's able to be there for the kids. But I said, girl, if Eddie go to jail, I hope it's not a long time. Eddie seems to be like a very nice person. And I, ooh, I hope Eddie and Wendy are able to keep the cannabis line. Hopefully they move some stuff around where when they get out, or when he gets out, that he's able to, have his money. Because this is crazy. This is crazy. So the conversation continues on, where they start talking about the children. Eddie ends up saying, as a parent, I imagine your first thought is, who would look after my kids? Like, do you have plans for that? And Wendy says, I pray that we don't have to do that. So then Andy says, the case that they're presenting is very worrying. Like, girl, it's not looking good. And honestly, this felt like a goodbye. Wendy ends up saying, I would say let things play out, and, let things play out in court. And I said, ooh, girl, this is bad. This is bad. this is bad. No, so then Wendy ended up saying, like, I'm not here to correct things that keep coming up in the media. Like, I'm not about to object to every headline. I'm just going to let things play out in court and let the legal system do what it does. So then Andy talks about how Wendy was an upstanding, or is an upstanding housewife, an exemplary role model. And you can tell that Wendy is getting very emotional. And she was like, chill, bro. And she said, thank you, Andy, for always believing in me. She starts to cry, where she says, I told myself, like, I was not going to lose it. I was not going to cry. She also says, when we met at BravoCon, Andy, I don't think you know that you give the best hugs. And when you hug me, I feel like you hugged every part of me, and you didn't want to let go. And so then Andy ends up asking Karen, like, do you have any word of advice for Wendy? And Karen says, first of all, we are phenomenal Black women, and we can face all adversity. And she says, I know and I hope and pray that, like she says, I know you'll rise when it comes to this, but I hope and pray that you don't have to have your liberties taken away from you. And I just know if that does happen, that there's always another side and it won't break you. And if you be real with yourself, it will actually change you and there'll be a better version of yourself. And so Wendy says thank you to Karen. And she actually says, like, I actually feel like I am a better person going through this storm. She says, I know I'm not out of the storm, but she says this situation has built humility and it also has built strength in her. And she's already a better person and she is grateful for it. Girl, I got so sad because I really don't want them to go to jail. So the last 5 minutes of the episode, we see them kicking Karen and Monique off the stage. Karen and Giselle are embracing each other. Tia actually goes and checks up on Wendy and she's like, I know that wasn't easy for you. And then we actually see Eddie come on stage and he's asking her, are you all right? Like, how are you doing? Are you okay? And you could tell that Wendy is like breathing a sigh of relief that that part of the segment is over. So then as everyone's, fluffing themselves out, getting ready for the latter, like the last part of the reunion, we actually see Kiarna after Andy ends up saying, come on, y'all, we about to wrap this up. She says, did Giselle go? Like, did she go? And then Giselle's like, huh? Like, she's actually surprised and didn't even realize that she didn't have a package. So then Wendy ends up saying, did you go? Like Giselle, she's like, Giselle didn't get a package. Like everyone's surprised. You have Stacey just looking like, ooh, girl, you ain't getting no package. Like, and then Giselle's like, yeah, where is my package? I said, ooh, Giselle. Ooh, girl. So Andy's like, okay, y'all. We're back. So he ends up asking everyone, what are lessons that you have learned this season? I'll start with the newbies. He asks Angel. Angel ends up saying, I've learned that being zen and calm doesn't mean you need to skip over things that bother you. You need to address them. Then Tia ended up saying, my biggest takeaway is that I can be naive at times, and sometimes I say things not really understanding the damage that it may cause, so I just want to be more mindful. Kiarna ends up saying, like, this night here today on this stage, this reminds me that we all have more things in common than not, and that I need to remember to put myself in other people's shoes. Ashely ends up giving us... Okay, my bad. Ashely ends up saying, I've always looked at this group as a sisterhood. Girl, lies you tell from the pits of hell. She says, you guys have been there for me for the last 10 years, and I think that I have started to maybe not be sisterly. You've never been this ain't no sisterhood to nobody. Shouts out to all the Basketball Wives fans, because Ashely, you have always been unsisterly, always. So they continue on where Ashely ends up saying, I want to lean more into my sisterly side with the group. So then Giselle ends up saying, well, since I just realized I didn't get a package, well, let me give you a synopsis about what's going on in my life. Andy goes, okay, because he wasn't expecting that from her. Giselle says, my children are great. One of my children joined the same sorority as me. Her daughter became an AKA, so she was like, the legacy continues. She then ends up saying that she has been dating a lot, but she wants to move forward. We're looking for quality over quantity. So then she also says she's looking into a lot of new business endeavors, but she's willing to share those with the world as they come. And then Tia says, is it a cannabis line? Is it a gummy line? It got a cute chuckle out of everybody. She says, I also need to get used to groups changing as we grow. She says that a lot of the times I don't like to embrace differences and changes. You could tell that Andy was smirking at her like, yeah, girl, we got your ass. Okay. And you just get, not only are you in the second chair, we also didn't run a package on you, girl. She says, I don't embrace change. I don't embrace differences. And she's like, I will do better embracing change. I was gagged that Giselle didn't get a package because I never thought I'd see the day that Giselle would get in trouble. Because honestly, production created Giselle. Giselle has been allowed to be mediocre for the past, honestly, 7 seasons. The best Giselle that we have gotten, I'll say 6 seasons. Giselle's season 1 through 4 was the best Giselle. After that, she's been mediocre. And the fact that she is the matriarch of this show, as well as one of the faces, if not the face, alongside with Karen, when it comes to Real Housewives of Potomac, Giselle is always on somebody else's franchise. She's on Ultimate Girls Trip for the second time. All the other housewives know who Giselle is. The fact that Giselle didn't get a package is embarrassing. And it shows Giselle that, girl, we will get rid of you. Because I was like, Giselle, you think second chair is bad? You going to be hurt if they move you to the third chair. So you better start showing your life, lady. Like, you've been on this show for 10 seasons and we didn't even get like a 10-year is it a relapse or a lapse video? I think it's a lapse video of you throughout the seasons. They had packages for Monique. Monique hasn't been here for 5 seasons, 5 years. They had a package for Jazzy. 2 friends of had packages and you didn't have nothing. That's embarrassing, Giselle. Get that together. So then they get to Stacey. Stacey ends up saying that she wants to continue being herself and she's not going to change. She's going to stay exactly the way she is. And I was like, why would she change? She's on Vanity Fair. The rest of the ladies can't say that. But she says she does want to be more direct in this group so that miscommunication stops. So then they get to Wendy, and Wendy says, in her new chapter in life, she wants to lead more with kindness, and because she says you never know what people are going through. And she said all these women were actually very kind to her. She thought that they would be a lot rougher with her at the reunion, so she appreciated that. She even points out that Monique has been a champion for her, and I think she only brought up Monique because it's like when her and Monique ended off season 5, there was no relationship there. They actually did not like each other. So the fact that Monique has been reaching out to her, hanging out with her without her kids and just wanting to get her out of the house, Wendy says that speaks to the core of this group, which is most of these women will show up for you when you need them most, including Bunyan Foot Ashely. Ashely ends up saying, I love you. No, you don't, girl. Lies you tell from the pits of hell. Okay, so then they end the reunion with Andy saying, thank you for a brilliant season. You all spoke so beautifully. And then he also says, let's take a picture. They take a picture and then they put a filter over it. And I screamed. I said, y'all are sick. But yeah, this video is way longer than I expected, but y'all already know that. Your girl's long-winded. I want to thank you all who tuned into my Real Housewives of Potomac reviews. I got new subscribers based off of the reviews. So as always, like we say over here, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.